Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic podcast, sponsored by Rack Coach and Sports Workbook. We got Jason Elkin on, my longtime friend. Jason, for those that don't know, can you tell the people watching the clinic now, or that will watch it on YouTube, a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Absolutely. Troy, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of tell my story and what I've done. I mean, obviously, I think the world of you and what you've been doing around here with from youth football, high school football, getting so many coaches together and really putting a tremendous message out there for everybody. But so thank you first and foremost for that. I'm born and raised here in Richmond. I was a Freeman graduate back in '89. Grew up wrestling there with under a guy named Drew Bright, who really helped me push what it meant to be a hard worker, disciplined, dependable, reliable, trustworthy, and really those basic core values that most athletes and coaches strive to get their athletes to work off of. Um, when I was going through high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do once I got to college. Once I got to college, I was going to be a high school PE teacher, wrestling coach until my last semester at VCU. I was coaching wrestling at Freeman and then Tucker. So of course I got to work with a gentleman named Jay Cox and obviously Drew Bright. And and then from in doing that, and I loved the hard work, the discipline, the athletes who really wanted to push themselves. And that's kind of where I started doing a little bit of strength conditioning was over at Tucker. My last semester, I realized once I was substitute teaching and I had a harder time dealing with the everyday kid. Somebody that wasn't quite as driven, didn't want to do things, and fortunately, unfortunately, I decided not to go into that side of the teaching. Well, I still think I teach every day, but it just through the educational system I didn't. Um, so I started after substitute teaching. I ended up having to do a 480-hour internship, and so I went over to University of Richmond under a guy named Trey, whose name was Trey Teichelman. He was the strength coach over at Richmond, and fortunately during that time, that was when Jim Reed was the head football coach at Richmond, and it was what a tremendous experience that was. I mean, and I'm going to age myself because you had a guy who was the defensive back coach named Mike London. You had a linebacker coach, John Zamberlin, Frank Leonard, Joe Cullen, who just won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, you had all kinds of just unbelievable. Greg Lilly was a quarterback on that team, and so you had all kinds of guys who were going through, and you got to see athletes at a young age who were just driven for success. And coming out of that Richmond program, during that time, we had Sean Barber who ended up going to. Yep, Mark Megna was there. I mean, those are guys who, I mean, I still speak to Mark, and I was down in Miami a couple of years ago and got to go see his facility. And so, guys that had the same core values and beliefs of just hard work, dedication, and what that takes. And so, after University of Richmond, I ended up going down to University of Tennessee. I'd sent in my resume, got accepted to go to Tennessee to be a student for my graduate assistant for going into graduate school. And very fortunately, I was at a clinic in Atlanta where I met Tommy Moffitt and John Stuckey. John Stuckey was the head strength coach at University of Tennessee at the time. And during that time, you had John Stuckey, Boyd Epley, a couple other guys who were really the founding fathers of strength conditioning during this. And I just had in talk with them and have an opportunity to get on to their strength staff. I jumped both feet in, head first. Absolutely, I will volunteer. I will do whatever it takes to be a part of that staff. So I moved down there that summer, and this was 1995. And so I go down there, and very fortunately, I happen to be part of the Tennessee strength staff during Manning's junior and senior year. And that was a eye-opening experience. But not only was it just that, that's obviously the big name through that time, but as a staff, we had guys from all over the place who later became big things in this. And as a young guy from Richmond, Virginia, who didn't really have a whole lot of experience except for along about a year and a half at University of Richmond, I had that opportunity. And please excuse me, when I started working with Jim Reed, and we were talking, and I didn't know kind of what I wanted to Tennessee. I didn't know if I wanted to go yet. He said, "Let's stay here at Richmond," and I worked with, and I was able to work with all the athletes at University of Richmond. He pushed me to Tennessee for me to go down there. Once I got there, that's where I met Tommy Moffitt during that year. And during that year, from Richmond into Tennessee, I got down there, and everybody worked with the football program. And the guys who we had the opportunity to work with, it was just a really, really cool scenario to be able to be a part of that program. And you really learned your basics and got to make your bones in the industry. And so from Tennessee, I was there for 2.5 years, and then after Tennessee, I went to a private boys' school in Chattanooga called the Macaulay School, where I was there for 7.5 years. Fortunately, won the state championship in '01, and that was their first state championship in school history. Had a lot of great individuals who came out of there. But we worked with all the sports, from the wrestling, the swimming, rowing, everything during Macaulay while I was at Macaulay. From Macaulay, went to a company called D1 Sports Training that was owned or is owned by a gentleman named Will Bartholomew, who was a fullback at Tennessee at the time. And so, and I came over, left, was there for about 4.5 years before I had an opportunity to move back home to Richmond, where I've now owned Elkin Sports Performance for the last 14 years. And this has been a really cool path and fun path to kind of see how everything has progressed all the way through. So that's kind of where I am on that line as far as what I've done and kind of where I came from a little bit.
Yeah, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, they're here to get a helmet for their banquet that they're having. So if I have to run out real quick to get a helmet, I'll just get you on a story. But Jim Reed, I can't remember who I was talking to, but somebody told me that his teams were the most well-conditioned teams that they've ever seen. Now, I don't know who this was. It was probably somebody that, you wouldn't even have thought of that I had on the show. It's just somebody that knew him from Massachusetts. But
Well,
talk about that.
Well, we're going back to when I'm just a brand new strength coach, or really a volunteer, so to speak, getting involved in it. And we'd go into that into practices, and Coach Reed was just, first of all, an absolutely fantastic coach and mentor to be a part of, and he truly taught you how to be disciplined. He truly believed in what you needed to do to become the best athlete you could be. And his demands were you came here to work. Don't get in trouble. Do the right things. And then we worked those guys really, really hard. And like I said, I was a brand new intern at that time, just doing that. So the guy who was running it, Trey Teichelman, Coach Reed gave him the marching orders. Trey took it, and he just pushed the tempo. And those guys got really strong and worked really hard to reach all their goals.
I can remember being a kid. I was probably a junior in high school, and I went to watch the University of Richmond play a home game. And I remember you used to be able to get free tickets or something through U-Crops, or I can't remember what it was. But I remember watching Joe Cullen, who I didn't know his name, but I just knew that the guy's face was about as red as this bear. And then, how you doing, man? Kelly's going to get you a helmet, okay? His face was as red as this bear. And then I heard stories about him throwing up and everything in the trash can. Tell us about Coach Cullen.
Well, during the time when I knew him, we're going back years and years now. We're going back years and years. When I was there, he was just crazy intense, and you better bring your A game every day. And he had those guys just barking. He had those guys ready to battle at any given time, those guys were ready to go. And the players who played for him, either some people could take it, some people couldn't, but he was there to lead men. He wasn't worried about any other stuff. Either you can play football for him or you can't. Either you're gonna go with what he's bringing or you're not. And from what I understand, he's still like that. I haven't spoken to the man in years and years, but everybody that have come through and listened to, I know that Mark Megna just did a podcast with him about him and his leadership qualities and what he does, and
I
just
need
his
to listen to
demands
that.
in his demands and what and the expectations. And and it is a you can expect things from athletes. You can expect them to be on time. You can expect them to work hard. You can expect them to fail and to pick them up, and either they're going to do what you want them to do or they're not. Right? I mean, one of the podcasts I heard here recently, one of the coaches talked about either two things: either I'm glad I did or I wish I had, and it really kind of falls in those two categories. And some of these guys that they come in, and you better wish you had shown up on time and worked really hard. But when your feet get put in the fire, you better have been prepared for that moment. And there's a big difference on the mentality of 4th and 1 mentality. What does that mean? And are the guys prepared for that hit? Are the athletes prepared for that part of it? And that goes with life. That goes with kind of everything. Right now is what are they able to do, and are they prepared for that? Have they conditioned enough? Have they practiced hard enough? Have the coaches put them in the proper position to when they get to that moment, are they ready to execute that at their highest ability?
Yeah,
And I think that's what Coach Cullen has brought out with a lot of those guys.
We read this book in one of my classes, Dream Big and Never Quit. This is the story of Mark Megna and our friend Randy West, made the movie documentary about him. But anybody that's been associated with University of Richmond football, they know who this guy is.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about him and his work ethic and when you were around Mark Megna at the University of
So, I
Richmond?
mean, we're going back to the early 90s now. And so what I recall as a young strength coach, so I'm going back, I'm 51 now. So I'm going back to when I was 20, 21 years old. And when I'd walk into the weight room and you see a guy like right before he's getting ready to max out squat and he's shaking the bar and screaming and getting himself hyped up and goes to hit it. And I saw him one day miss a squat, punch a mirror, and just get fired up, but then turn around, walk around the weight room, come back, and I'm doing it one more time. I'm going to get it. And so you're talking about two guys, two peas in a pod, so to speak, with Joe Cullen and Mark Megna in that same room, and they just fed off of each other, and they just went after, but they fed the same system, right? I mean, they needed and they craved that want and that desire to be the absolute best that they could be. There was no shortcuts with that, and there's no reason to doubt why Mark would be a success as he went on. Just a tremendous athlete, even better person. As he's gone through, and where anytime I've reached out, he's been kind to get back in touch and have conversations. Like I said, I was down in Miami with my family. We're sitting, my wife and kids are on the beach. I said, "Hey, baby, I need to dip out for a second. I need to go see a weight room." She's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, my Mark Megna from Richmond. He owns Anatomy here, and I want to go see it. I want to go see because I know it's been done the right way, and I want to see what they're doing. Is there anything that I can take from what he's doing back to my facility and see if there's anything that we can do better?"
Yeah, Mark is special, and I mean he visited with my class. I mean, I hit him up on Instagram. Yeah, he went and got the helmet. I hit him up on Instagram, and the next day he's doing a Google Meet with my class, and my class tripped. I mean, they were like, they couldn't believe it, man, because they just read a book about this guy and everything he had done and played in the NFL and CFL and all the adversity he had overcame being from Fall River. And that meant so much to my class. So you left the University of Richmond and you go to Tennessee. And at Tennessee, you get hooked up with the GOAT, Tommy Moffitt.
Well, he was. Well, first of all, I mean, we all had the fortunate opportunity. The original GOAT was John Stuckey, and we got a chance to work with Coach Stuckey, who was he like I said, he was one of the founding fathers of strength conditioning. He was one of the guys who just pushed the tempo and pushed the envelope differently than any other people had done it prior to. And we were all fortunate to fall under that tree. And my immediate boss under John Stuckey was Tommy Moffitt. And so we had guys, Tommy Moffitt. There's a gentleman, Aaron Osmus, who he does an app now called Pen and Paper Strength app, and he was a thrower back then. Was actually a national indoor champion, but he became the head strength coach at Tennessee and USC and Ole Miss. And Eric Siana was on that staff, who's now the head strength coach for the Buffalo Bills. Noel Durfee, who was with Duke with Coach Cutcliffe and now down at FIU. My best friend was a guy named Johnny Long, who became the head strength coach at Tennessee for 9 years. Chris Carlisle, who was from Tennessee, then went to USC with Pete Carroll, then with the Seahawks for years and years. So we had and there's Chris Stewart, who was at University of Richmond, and then he's at Delaware right now. We had a guy named Rob Phillips, who was all over the place. Tommy Stuckey. We had guys that were all over that had come in and worked so hard. We had just a tremendous staff when you went in, and you have better brought your A game as a worker each day, or else you're going to get pushed off to the side, because the athletes can see through it. You better know what you're doing, how to talk, what's going on. And athletes will sniff you out quicker than anybody. You better know what you're talking about and put them in the right position, that you're there for them, that you can push and you can prod and you can get them where they want to go and help them reach their goals. But it needs to be where it's very definitive on what you're doing. So that was an unbelievable experience down there.
Yeah, Jim Tim, who's commented, he's went to East Stroudsburg, and now he lives in Rochester, New York. He's one of the biggest supporters of the clinic. Good afternoon, all. We all have to go back to the basics with these athletes. Old school blood, sweat, and tears. Have you ever worked with Billy Gillespie?
Great question. James, no, I haven't, but I know Coach Gillespie, and what he did at Liberty and what he's done in this industry is nothing short of awesome. And he is just, what I did see was back in 2001, I got nominated to be high school strength coach of the year for the National Strength Conditioning Association. We had a big thing out in Spokane, Washington, and they did a strongman competition that day. And watching Bill Gillespie hit 4 or 5 on the bench for 20 times. They took rebar and he's bending it, and he was just absolutely great. One of my former employees, who's now a fantastic colleague of mine, Aaron, was down at Belhaven University in Jackson, Mississippi, and he was under Bill Gillespie at Liberty, helping him. And so just hearing the stories about he was one of the guys one of the old guys in the industry who has just done so much for it. And he's a living legend in what we do. So I'm a big fan of everything that he's done.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about the history of strength and conditioning, but since we were still on Tennessee, I remember one time I asked you who was the hardest worker that you had ever worked with, and this was, when you first got, back around to Richmond, and you had told me the sheriff, Peyton Manning. What was it like to be around a guy like that when you were such a young coach?
You know what, Coach? I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? First and foremost. So as a young coach, you've seen hard workers. You've seen the Sean Barbers. I had seen a Mark Megna. You had seen other guys. I grew up wrestling, but then there's a whole different level. And a lot of times you see athletes that have this stigma of, oh, I'm the best, I'm this, and they rely on baseball team while I was there. And so by default, I got to work with all the three. So I got a chance to work with Peyton and got to work with T. Martin and some of these other guys. And so by working with Peyton during that time, he was the guy who just he was super diligent on every single thing. So everybody had their own workbook, but he was the one guy that would have notes on every set, every rep, that he just took notes. And if you were to look at his workbook, he had it. And it's funny because I was down at LSU a couple years ago for my daughter's gymnastics, and I was in Tommy Moffitt's office, and he had one of his old folders, old workbooks, and it had everything just written in there. And just that's how you take care of it. We'd go through, and the way that the facility was set up at Tennessee, that the indoor facility, but to the right of it was the outdoor practice field. So they'd come in and everybody else is taking their shoulder pads off and helmets off, dumping it in the bin and heading off to the locker room because practice is over. And Peyton was a guy who would either put on a sled and run extra hundreds, or he'd go into the weight room and he'd get extra, or he's studying film and he's getting extra. And it was always just doing more. I mean, graduated college in 3 years. So his last year when he did come back, it was that he could take his master's classes and they come and just focus on football last year and do everything kind of by the book. And he was able to show me as a young strength coach what it took. And I go back to John Stuckey. We'd sit down in coaches meetings. We had 6 a.m. coaches meetings. And he was like, look, as you have one out there who you will go through and judge all your other athletes by. And this is what it is. He goes, I was fortunate because Coach Stuckey got a chance to do that with Barry Sanders and with Peyton Manning. And so you're having two of the best that have ever done it. And he was able to show what that work ethic was and how the bar and where the bar should be set. And he was the only one. We had to, during that time, Manning's senior year was where we beat Auburn in the SEC championship and then played Nebraska with Amon Green and those guys. Scott Frost was actually the quarterback, where got a chance to play them and unfortunately got beat that day. But I like to tell people that that Tom Osborne and we went out of college football at the same time together. Very, very similar careers. Me as a weight room GA and his as a Hall of Fame quarterback coach. So,
yeah, he was great.
So, but it's just an unbelievable experience. But because of that and seeing that work ethic, that allowed me that as I'm going through and coaching other athletes. And when I left Tennessee and went to Macaulay, and I had it was a private boys school, and so you got a chance to see kids from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade. You knew what the best looked like. You knew what the best looked like, and you knew where to go to. It wasn't any guesswork in it. And it's been neat that over the years that been able to see certain athletes that exemplify that same level of want and desire. And you can, I've been very, very fortunate in my life to have trained a lot of athletes, and not saying that others didn't work hard, because there's been some unbelievably hardworking men and women that I've had the opportunity to work with. But there are certain ones that just stand above and beyond all of them. And they're just different. And then you see their successes at the next level, and there's no real shock on why they are on why that they are.
Yeah, who they are. And we're going to get to all those guys. Pepper says it's Coach Hadaway.
Hey,
you got the nickname Pepper, huh? Yeah.
I like that.
Good. We're salt and pepper. I like it.
I like
Good
that.
afternoon, Jason. Just popped
I love
in
some
to
Coach
say
Hadaway
hello.
now.
Thank you for watching the podcast, Coach Hadaway. We need to get you back on here. So I wanted to ask you this, because I had a guy on here named Jeff Fisher who runs High School Football America. He's done 40 years on radio and TV. And I asked him, I said, how does it feel to have 40 years in radio and TV, and then a guy like me that doesn't know anything just jumps on and I have a podcast and I think I'm like a big shot. So like I'm gonna ask you the same thing. You've had 40 years or 30 years or so in strength and conditioning, and you see these guys, I mean, they may be on YouTube, they may be on Twitter, they may be on Instagram, but they claim to know the science behind strength and conditioning and they claim to be the gurus. How does that make you feel that people can get a certificate, not even a CSCS, but it's kind of like I'm asking you the same question as the guy that did the 40 years in TV and radio. Like, how does that make you feel?
Troy, that is a fantastic question. Um, you know, I go back to that you can only control what you can control. I try not to think about stuff like that, right? But it is athletes and parents are going to make choices, and they make certain choices. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of success on what we've done, and we're very systematic on the reasons why we do what we do. My program doesn't have as many bells and whistles or this or the. I'm not gonna. If you see an agility ladder, while I like an agility ladder as much as the next guy, my program is not based around an agility ladder. That's a good tool. It is part of it. I think there are certain things that I think the strength conditioning world should be made up of: your power lifting, your Olympic lifting, your functional movement, your agility, your speed, and how you're going to combine everything. I don't think that if you're just in one line that is going to get you where you need to go. But that's my belief. Million ways to skin the cat. One of my coaches, athletes, one of my favorite people now that I get a chance to work with is a gentleman named Felton Davis. And Felton, who had a great career here, Michigan State, Kansas City Chiefs, getting ready to go back to CFL.
Yeah, he beat me. He beat me.
My son is a college freshman playing lacrosse right now. And we got into talking about a couple different things, and Felton goes, "Man, you know what? Comparison is the thief of all joy." And I was like, I love that statement, because if I continue to sit there and try to compare myself to others or what they're doing, it takes me away from what I'm doing, what I love, and how to better myself. I see some of the stuff that's out there. Some of the stuff, I look at it and I go, that's a pretty good drill. I haven't thought about doing the same apparatus, but doing it like that. I like that. Other ones, I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. So, I mean, I think strength conditioning, we're a bunch of thieves that we could just steal great ideas from other people. That's why there's so many clinics out there for football, for different sports. I know that we're running a spread offense, but if I can come away from a clinic with one or two plays that I can add into my arsenals or have a derivative of, then it was a well worth it clinic. But going in and seeing what others are doing compared to what I do, I try not to look at that as much. I mean, because there is a great deal of, I've played football, or I've done this, therefore I can do strength conditioning. So, I mean, I just think that it's a different approach for what people are doing. I like the holistic approach of, and our saying has been very simple: outwork them all and do plain vanilla great. Just do plain vanilla great. And if you can do plain vanilla great, I think that as an athlete that you're going to be so far ahead of the game. Because I think that what people fail to realize is that just under 94% of all high school athletes do not play college sports, not just football, any sport. So just over 6%, just shy of 7%, play college athletics. And so your training needs to be to make a high school player, in my opinion, have a high school athlete maximize their high school experience. And that with Instagram and everything that's done, nobody puts failures on social media. They're only going to put their great on social media, and people compare themselves. Oh, he's there, she's there. Well, you know what? I think that people have missed it, that it is okay. It's perfectly fine to have a great high school football experience or great high school athletic experience. You may not play college sports, but if you're part of a program and you have learned during the course of your high school career to work hard, to be disciplined, to be reliable, to be trustworthy, to be a great teammate. Because as you know, when you're playing the game, whatever sport you're playing, there's somebody on that team that you may not like. But you got to depend on them. You got to rely on them to execute the game plan. You may be in a work situation. They put that you're a part of Team Blue, and you have to go sell this contract and do anything. But you know that one person you just don't care for. But you got to work together. And you got to learn how to do it. And I think that's what the team aspect, and that's what high school athletics really have the opportunity to push.
Good to see you. How you doing? Hey, let me say something to you, Chris. I got one of my former parents, one of my former players' dads here. I'm gonna say hi to him real quick. But I learned something a long time ago that I've always told my players, and that the strongest people in the world are like right around 40, and the fastest people in the world are like late 20s, right around 30. And some of these high school kids, and I had a parent tell me, I think last year, they were like, well, my son ran a 4.640. That's not fast enough. So what do you think about that? Because is it true that like the fastest guys in the world are like 28, 29, and the strongest dudes are like 38 and 39? Like these high school kids have not peaked out. And if you peak out so soon, I mean, what have you really done?
Well, I think that what it does is that it has that you, as you older, you have more time to develop. You've had more time to train and to get where you want to go on that. No, I don't believe that a high school junior or sophomore can run as fast as a college senior. I mean, I just have not seen it. Is there an exception to the rule? Maybe. But I just have not, in my experience, I just have not seen it. I think it just takes more time to develop the athlete. It has more time to develop the hamstrings, everything else that is needed for the sprint and for the power that's applied. And you're going to need that specific training as you continue to go forward. Athletes that they can get stronger, and then depending on where they are on their age, is can they get stronger as they're going on? Absolutely. But have they gotten all the juice they can, and depending on what they've done in their early 20s, if they're playing at a college and what they've done in college, and if they're working on their strength levels all through college and they're lifting them and maxing them all the way through, that might be detrimental for their future strength. But they can get stronger if they haven't gotten all the juice out of that squeeze in college. As far as the fast athletes, like I said, I have not seen a high school athlete run faster than a NFL prospect. Years and years ago, we had an athlete who went to a camp and ran a 40. Well, it was a college camp, and they clocked him, and they said he ran a 4.29. He missed him. It's not a big deal. Or it was either 4.29 or 4.31, but he missed him. He just either started late, he stopped it early, and when the parents posted it, I was like, hey, look, I had timed the man 20 times, and he'd been running between a 4.51 and a 4.56 every time, which for at the time, this young man's size and speed was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was awesome. It was one that, like I said, for his size and speed, it was great. But I told the parents that he didn't run a 4.29. It's just he just missed him. Don't post that, because that's just not the right one.
No. I mean, if a kid's hitting that, what should they be hitting the 100 in? I mean, they should be winning the state championship, right? In the 100 meters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're just not going to, and it's just not happening at that side. So I think that if the athlete can just have a sound strength conditioning program that they are consistent at day in and day out. The biggest thing with a high school athlete is consistency. Can they get in season, which majority of coaches, and the exception, is the majority of high school football coaches don't want to give up practice time to get an in-season lift. And there's too many things to install. There's too many things. The times are too short during the day after school. But I believe it's imperative to get 2 days a week during in season. Once off season hits, then you should be able to get 3 to 4 days a week lifting to maximize that stuff. And the more, it's like anything else. I mean, you're going to get better at it the more consistent you are. You want to get stronger, show up 3 to 4 days a week every week and train as hard as you can. And if you can and you do that, but some days you may only feel 60%, but you need to be able to give me 100% of that 60% that day. And to make sure you take care of your bodies. I think that unfortunately with a lot of the high school athletes, that they're not eating correctly. They're not sleeping as much as they need to. They're definitely not being as high as, they're not hydrated the way that they should be. And they fail to realize that rest, recovery, hydration, strength, that's going to play a tremendous role in what they're doing and their future successes.
Yeah, Jim Tim has a question. He said, what is your favorite type of program you have used over the years?
James, I mean, I'm a basic guy. I'm a basic guy. We're going to squat, clean, pull, and press. And we're going to do it consistently over and over and over again. It depends on the age of the athlete. We want to make sure that our middle school athletes, when they come in, that we teach them day one, week one, phase one. They're going to learn the basics for the first 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the athlete. Some athletes can jump a little bit further. Some ones could take a little bit longer to go. Once they are sound in their progressions, then you can call it a squat, but a squat can be a bodyweight squat, a medicine ball squat, a goblet squat, a landmine squat, a back squat, a front squat. So we're going to teach them how to squat properly. Single leg, make sure that they are not only bilateral, but they can do single leg as well, and make sure that they can do that. Then we want them to be explosive as they go through, and as their strength levels grow, then we can help them progress into the explosive phases as well throughout that. Then we want to couple that with our conditioning and our agility and speed training. I think a lot of athletes, especially in high school, miss out on the hard conditioning. People don't want to take the time to do hard conditioning. And that is where I believe that you're going to prevent dumb pulls, that you're going to be able to push the athlete further as they go in, and you push that condition level. In my experience, and you may be different, Coach, I've never had an athlete that's walked off the field or a court or a track and went, dadgum, I was in too good a shape or I was too strong. I've just never have heard that. I've definitely heard, no. Oh my gosh, my wind's not where I need it to be, or man, I need to get stronger. I've heard both of those, but I've never heard an athlete go, wow, I was just in too good a shape today, Coach. I mean, go ahead.
Have you ever heard this? We have too many offensive linemen. Yeah, I've never heard that either. I've never heard that from a coach. We have too many offensive linemen, and nobody wants to play offensive line. Everybody wants to be a quarterback or a linebacker, but no one's ever said that. It's crazy. But I want to get to the guys that you've trained and everything in the Richmond area. But before we do that, like you talked about, you're a squat, clean, push, and pull guy. Mm-hmm. And if I think about strength and conditioning, I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever done it better than the commies. I mean, the Russians figured it out. And I don't know if Louis Simmons was the one that brought it to America or who did, and then Boyd Epley, and then your coach at the University of Tennessee. But, I mean, is there anything that's really new that the Russians didn't know that they were doing so long ago?
I mean, like I said, with the age group that I personally work with, the majority of the athletes that I work with are the middle school and the high school athletes. I think that you can get everything that you want out of those basic exercises. Because we are not, as far now on the college level, it's more data driven, which I totally understand. And what you can do off the data that is brought in, where the athletes are, how their bodies are responding. It's much different of a strength coach 10 years ago walk up to a head football coach and go, Coach, our guys are just tired. They just got to suck it up and go. Now you have data to prove, hey, we have 72% of our team that's running in the red right now. We can have practice, but coach, we really need to adjust and not have a hard day today. Or if it's going to be hard, instead of having a 2-hour practice, we need to condense it to an hour practice to make sure that we can get what we want to get out of it and stay focused and keep our athletes injury free. As far as the middle school and the high school athlete, these are young men and young women who are playing multiple sports. If they're playing basketball, they may play for 2 different teams. Some of the baseball players are playing for 3 different teams, which is a lot in my opinion, but that's just what they do. If you're playing lacrosse, you may play during a travel season and you're traveling everywhere. You may play for a couple different organizations. So that's why I believe that your in season, your twice a week, every week should be a mainstay as far as the athletic development of what they're doing. As far as what's new, there's so much stuff that I think, like I said, it's more data driven on that side. But we end up just sticking with obviously we're stretching, obviously we're going through mobility exercises, we're warming up correctly, we're making sure our core is done, but then we're making sure that our strength levels are where they need to be.
Yeah, so you moved back here to Richmond, and I can't remember. Were you with Velocity or
I was with D1
just tell me
Sports
that whole story of how you got to the point where it's Elkin Sports Performance.
I was working for a company in Tennessee, and my son was about a year removed, or a year and a half before he was going to start kindergarten. My wife's from Richmond as well. We had been in Tennessee for 14 years, and we really just kind of had made a decision of either we're going to stay in Knoxville or Tennessee and make this our home, or we're going to move back to Richmond. And we decided we want to move back to Richmond to be closer to family for her folks, my folks, and everybody around us. And that's kind of where we both had pretty good nucleuses of friends here. And so I was actually at a conference in Denver, Colorado, to how to run, called the Facility Operators Convention or something, that how to run a giant facility. Because the company I was with, I had gotten put in charge of running of opening and running the day-to-day operations for the Alaska Dome, 190,000 square foot indoor bubble. How? I don't know, but that's just what I ended up getting put in charge of. And while I was there, I met a gentleman named Mark Grossman who owns SCORE Sports Center Richmond here in town. He had known my parents. I knew him, and we kind of hooked up. And probably about 8 months later, he called and said, "Hey, what's it going to take for you to get back to Richmond?" I said, I want to own my own facility. And so I moved back here, opened my spot over at SCORE, was there for about 7 years before I moved over here to Rocket Sports. And so it's been really neat. I guess at some point in time, I realized that fortunately I wasn't that much of a jackass growing up. So I got to call on a bunch of people who I knew and just kind of worked our way around. And fortunately, I think that we have under promised and over delivered on different things, on what we're doing and how we're training athletes and what we're doing. And so fortunately, we've been able to hang in there.
I mean, there's so many guys. I mean, I'm probably not correct term to use, but chicken hawks. They, go around looking for the kid who's elite, the guy that's already got offers, and they want to take a picture and they want to say that they trained this kid or they were the secret to that kid's success. And that's one thing I can say about you have never done, that you only claim guys that you actually worked out, that you actually were in, they bought into you and you bought into them.
Well,
and, who are some of the first guys here in Richmond that really bought into you?
Well, I mean, I look at guys, and you're exactly right. I don't want it to be about me, and it killed. I mean, like for example, an Anthony Harris, who was an LC Bird guy. He started working out with me in 10th grade, and when he went through and all through his and on and off throughout high school and college, and then through the NFL, and before he moved down to Miami, he come in, and even now, when he comes into Richmond, he'll come in and get his workouts in. And when it went to Philadelphia, when they're going to the Super Bowl, of course I'm going to post something. I mean, that's my guy. I mean, I think the absolute world of him. He's a fantastic human who happens to play football, and I posted something out there. My mom went out but the coach. I went, whoa, you got to take that down. That's not what I'm about. If I wanted to pump me, I'd pump me, but it's not about me. It's about the athlete. It's always about the athlete. Even in my facility, all my coaches understand the only people that are important in here are the athletes on the floor, not the coaches. If I'm coaching somebody, but you see something that I missed, freaking call it, because I want to make sure that those athletes get what they need. Fortunately, we've had one of the guys who actually coaches with me now, but he started me in 7th grade, was Richard Ashby, who went through LC Bird and had a tremendous high school career and great college career at Virginia Tech, and is still working into playing football. And he's one of the guys, coach, that when we talked about how Peyton Manning worked out, and
I remember you told me that.
Different.
You said that he
was different. Richard
like
Ashton, he walked in the door in 7th grade, and we had a 45-pound plate on the ground, like a rubber plate. And we were doing toe taps. He was doing that drill as if his life depended on it. And now in his mid-20s, when he works out, there's no different the way he works out. He's the guy that allows a coach to worry about the other 10 people on the field. You don't have to worry about him. He's a take care. You don't have to worry about that guy. And we've had guys like him. Have had the Kenny Williams who went through and played basketball at LC Bird and then at UNC. Armando Baycott, who's still there, who's still at UNC. We've had a lot of Tim Harris out of Verina. You've had a lot of guys who have come through who just Maurice Canaday. I mean, all these guys, and it's funny because one of the videos that I have has like 11 guys in it. And out of those 11 guys, 100% of them went on to play college football. And this was back when they were in middle school and their freshman, sophomore year of high school. Out of those 11, 6 of them went on to play professional football. And you look back at that video, it's like, man, you had the best of the best who are coming through there working, and it wasn't anything crazy. They just worked really, really hard, and they had their God-given ability of their athletic ability, and they just tried to maximize everything, trying to get every drop of juice out of the squeeze that they could, and they have. And so that part of it has been really neat to see some of these athletes develop into the men that they become today, and women's. We've had a lot of. I mean, right now I have a ton of lacrosse people who are in. I want to say that right now we have almost 30 something athletes that have come through the program that are playing college lacrosse all up and down, starting for their teams and having a tremendous impact on that side. We've had swimmers who have come through, volleyball players, baseball, basketball, football. So fortunately, it's not just one sport. It's all the different athletes, but the one thing they all have in common is they just work harder than everybody.
Talk a little bit about getting involved with the Verina basketball program and the change that y'all had there.
It was a couple of years ago. I haven't worked with them in a couple of years, but when Coach Lacey, who's now down at Richard Bland, we had contacted, and obviously, right, the one thing that makes really good coaches is tremendous athletes, and that makes every coach better. You get a good athlete, they can help a lot of things. And so over at Verina, they had gone 6-12 the previous year, and we started working with them, and they ended up the following year. The goal was to win 12 games the next year. Can we double the win capacity? Can they double the win total? And they did that. And when they did that, they happened to upset Patrick Henry Rona in a district championship, their first championship anytime since '89 when I graduated high school. And then the following year, they had won region championship, and then they won a state region and state after that. And I was very fortunate over at Henrico High School when Coach Harmon, we went. He was a year behind me at Freeman, and so it was a very easy connection over at Henrico when I came in. Started working with those guys, and during that time, they had won 2 state championships and a runner-up, and had worked with Coach Mans with some of his programs, and they had won a runner-up in the following year, won a state championship, and it goes to show that it's not that all of a sudden I have some magic pixie dust doing it, just that we were able to work with kids, and the magic pixie dust, so to speak, is just hard work, consistency. Let the kids show up and put a sound program together and let them go, because as you know, the only good athlete is the available athlete. If you're not if you have a 500-pound squat or 450-pound squat, but your back gets injured while you're doing it, that doesn't help you on the football field. That's awesome that you have a great squat, but that's not going to help you in the field of play. And I need to have you. I'd rather you squat 275 and come out and be available for me when I need you. And I just think that's just kind of where my head goes when it comes to training athletes.
Yeah, I mean, a guy that knows so much like yourself, when you see some of these kids or even colleges posting these maxes, and I mean, you see arched backs and like guys deadlifting weight, and like you're like, man, this ain't safe. I mean, have you seen this? How does this make you feel? Because it hurts my back. It makes me cringe.
Depending on what they're doing and how they're doing and who the coach is and what they're looking for, because I don't know. Right, it's kind of a catch-22, because I don't know if there's anything more exciting than squat or clean max day in a college weight room. If it's a college weight room and things are done and they're going, and you know that that's where you're going, and you've worked all summer or all spring for this day, and everybody is beyond excited, they're hyped up and the music's going, and someone hits a great squat and they come up and they have to fight off the bottom and they rack it. Oh my gosh. It gives me goosebumps. I mean, it's awesome. It's flat out awesome. If the technique breaks down, then obviously you just put in that once the backs, I think that the integrity of the back has to be there more than anything. I don't ever want to sacrifice the technique for weight. But it's also seeing, right, we call it that 4th and 1 mentality. Is that person, if they hit the bottom of that squat and they fight through that sticking position on a weight that just right teetering on that edge, and they're able to get it and rack it, and what that does to the psyche of not only that individual athlete but the athletes around them, and the whole place erupts and it goes nuts. I mean, obviously you've experienced it, but I mean, just the atmosphere that surrounds it is awesome.
Yeah. So, like, from what like you see, we're lucky we have a CSCS coach now, but some schools don't. Mm-hmm. So, like, what's the best thing that a school can do to protect themselves if they don't have a certified strength conditioning coach and they want to have a strength program?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of schools just really by default will go to one of the coaches on the staff who was a former football player, who's been around there, that they'll defer to them. A lot of schools are like that just because, like you said, because the finances just aren't quite there. And that's, we do a lot of that if you find, if it's here in Richmond, reach out. I'll be more than happy to come in. We put programs together for schools all over the place for that. We work with a number of them. Some of them that they want just the program. Some of them they want where they want somebody to come there 3 days a week. So it just depends on what that school wants. We've done clinics with schools where we'll go in on a Friday afternoon and we'll work with the coaching staff that's going to be in the weight room. It doesn't necessarily have to be just the football staff. That if the women's soccer coach is going to be the one that's overseeing the weight room during the time when her girls are in there, when and that's what's going on. We want her to be part of that program as well. And we'll go in on a Friday night. We'll do that. And then on Saturday, we bring kids in. And not only do we help, and we'll find out, we'll teach all the coaches what the terminology is and how and what you're looking for with that. Then you turn around and you have on Saturday, we bring in where we have all the kids that come in. And we'll bring them in at different blocks. We'll bring ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and then different teams come in, or different age groups, and then skill level will come in. And not only do we teach them what the lifts are, but the coaches will come in and they'll help navigate that and help coach it. And that way they get comfortable coaching that, because I'm not the one who's going to coach the X's and O's on the field. And most coaches don't want the time they know they have to lift to get stronger. They just don't want to spend all the time in there. So we'll help develop programs to put them in the proper path of success, to put in whether we can do teams or we do whole schools. We'll come in and help program for them and put that into play.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've almost been talking an hour right now. And I'm sorry for all the interruptions. I'm here at school and got people are coming in and out of here. I mean, I saw a guy who I haven't seen the kid in, golly, 20 years. And his dad came in here and asked me about a kid that went to Hopewell, helping him get to college. Yeah. So, and then FCA guy needed a helmet. So, like, what's the future for Elkin's? Elkin Sports Performance? Is it just continue with the facility y'all have, or what are your plans?
Yeah.
What are your goals and ambitions?
One of the things that as I've continued to get older, right, I'm not getting any younger. I guess the fortunate thing is I absolutely love what I do. It'd be different if I was miserable going to work every day, but I love going to work every day. It's kind of hard to be upset when you get to wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt to work, and if one day you wear a pair of pants and go, why are you so dressed up? So I love what I do. I'm ADD, so I feel like ESP gives me a chance to have 8 different jobs, from training a 8-year-old to training a pro athlete and training adult groups. And we do on-site training and we do a lot of off-site training. As I've gotten older, I really like the off-site training as well, where I'll go out. We have between different schools that we work with, I'll go out to their school, because it's a whole lot easier for me to travel to them than it is for me to try to get 50 people to come to me. So I'll go out there and do that. We do a lot of lacrosse training, swim training. Anybody who wants to get trained, I'll go out there and do just that in preparation for seasons. We do a lot of preseason stuff. So I love that side of it. I like that push to be able to get to that next step and to be able to go out and to do that. I really like the what we started doing is going, like I was just alluding to, of going to a school that doesn't have a high school strength program, but really knows that they need a sound one, and where they have a guy or girl who can coach it, who feels comfortable coaching it, but maybe not as comfortable programming for it. And so we take that side out of it. Here's what the programs are. Here's what you're doing. So here's what you should be doing on March 9th, 2023. You're with this sport. Here's what you're doing in the weight. Here's what your kid should be doing in the weight room that day. And then we work with them to, hey, this is going well. We want to add more of this. And so we help the programming side of that. I really like that, because it allows me to reach more kids and be influential on, or try to be somewhat influential on a young man or woman's growth, is to see if they can't reach their goals for being a high school athlete.
So as we end, Jason. What would you like to say to any of the coaches in the Richmond area or parents or players that might be watching this, on
It,
YouTube? Anything you think they should know?
Yeah, Coach. And I appreciate that. If you're looking for a place to get bigger, faster, stronger, that's gonna be sound progressions. That's gonna be age-specific workouts. I think that gets overlooked a whole lot. It's age-specific. That a 12-year-old is different from an 18-year-old, even if that 12, 13-year-old happen to have an early growth spurt and is 6'1", 175 as a 13, 14-year-old young man, woman that you be cognizant that just to be cognizant of the age of where they are and to make sure that the foundation is laid down properly. Because in my mind, the goal is not to become the greatest 12-year-old to ever play sports, but to be able to be in a position your junior and senior year to be, if you've checked out everything, and if you do have a chance to play at the next level, then you are prepared, and there is still tread left on the tire for the college coaches to utilize. And so if you're interested in individual training, if you're interested in a team, a league, school, we'd be more than happy to talk with you and assist you in your goals to help your team or school, league reach theirs.
Well, you're the best. You've always been the
Thank you,
best.
Coach.
Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate
Yeah,
having me on. This has been fantastic.
yeah. And so I'm going to end here. We'll talk a little bit once it stopped recording. But thank you, Coach.
Absolutely. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.